afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our December 6th work session. Up first today, we have a proclamation for World AIDS Day. Good afternoon. Thank you.
That's how you were in that one.
That's why we don't do it, because we never.
Blow it out. Blow it out.
All right, fiscal year 22 annual comprehensive financial report and presentation. Thus Michelle, Brooke, and Christopher Lehman.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I am, for the most part, going to turn everything over to Chris Lehman. You probably all do recognize him. He's been here several times in the past to produce and review both this report. And at this point, though, I would say we're reviewing fiscal year 22 actuals right now. I will answer questions to the best of my ability, but I have been all day working on fiscal year 24 budget, so like all my head is like in another place. And then Brooke, who is here, but she's sitting in the back, is currently working on the popular annual financial report. So it should be finished here at the end of December, and we'll come back in January and present a snapshot of what is in our much larger document. And hopefully everybody did, we did distribute the hardbound copies, and they would have been put in mailboxes, but the electronic version of the entire document has been on the website since October 31st. That, I'll turn it over to Chris.
All right, well, thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Lehman. I was the engagement partner on the audit again this year. And what I'll do is I'll walk through the presentation that you all have in front of you, as well as I have this fancy little tablet that I can scroll through on the screen. But if you have any questions, just feel free to stop me as I go through this. This is intended to be a high-level summary of our audit process and the results of the audit. So if you have any questions, just feel free to let me know as I go through this. On this slide here, on slide 3, you'll see the scope of services that we were engaged to perform. We were engaged to perform the audit of the June 30, 2022 financial statements for the city, as well as the city completes what's termed a annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, that's submitted to the GFOA award program, which is above and beyond the minimum requirements for completing a set of financial statements to be in compliance with regulations. But we've also reviewed that report, and that has been issued. In addition, because the city's received more than $750,000 of federal funds, you're also required to undergo an annual single audit. So we're in the process of completing that audit right now. That's a federally mandated requirement. It's a compliance-related audit based on your federal programs and your federal spending. We don't anticipate any issues or findings at this point, but we are in the middle of completing that report. In addition, upon completion of your annual financial statements, the Uniform Financial Report is also required to be submitted to the state as far as showing compliance with issuing your financial statements in a timely manner, as well as they take your financial statement data in a certain format and use that for their reporting mechanism, and that's also been submitted on a timely basis. And then once we complete the single audit, we'll also prepare what's termed the data collection form, and that'll be submitted to the federal government, and that'll let the federal government know that you've met your audit requirements from a single audit perspective.
And that's actually due March 31st, but we'll have it done before then.
Yep.
That last piece.
Yep, the data collection form. On slide 4, you'll see just a high-level summary of the results. We've issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That would be the best opinion we could give under professional standards, and that says that your financial statements are reasonably free of material misstatement. We did not discover any instances of fraud during the financial statement audit. It's not a forensic audit or a fraud-specific audit, but we have to have a healthy skepticism that fraud could happen at any point in any time. We did not discover any material weaknesses in the internal control structure that impacts the financial statements, and I'll have a slide that kind of walks through just some of those key areas, like some of those key processes that impact the financial statements. In addition, we received the full cooperation of management, so any records that we requested, we obtained adequate support for those items. Any questions we had, we got timely responses, adequate responses for those items. And then lastly, we did not propose any journal entries to the financial statements, which just speaks to the quality of your accounting system or your general ledger throughout the year. And it's not like it takes us to audit and clean up numbers so that they're presentable. The numbers that we receive for audit, we did not adjust any of those balances.
And just for the record, in case anybody was, in case anybody was, in case anybody was going to ask, on that last, next to last bullet on the full cooperation of management, primarily Brooke is our day-to-day person. Just in case anybody thought I was more difficult to deal with.
Not at all. Slide 6, this just shows a picture of our risk-based audit approach. And the next slide that I'm going to get into after this will go through our results of really the second phase that you see here in this funnel, the assessment of the test and design and operation of the controls. Because there's so many transactions flowing through the financial statements, there's a heavy reliance on internal controls. You know, if we look at payroll controls with approving pay rates, having approved timesheets, disbursements, having proper signatures and approvals and things of that nature, there's a heavy reliance in our audit on the internal controls. So the next slide here, I think it's next, but it's coming up. The slide coming up will walk through that results there. That's the slide on slide 7. So first we look at the internal control environment. There's 5 interrelated components that we look at: the control environment, management's risk assessment process, the control activities of the organization, information and communication, and then the ongoing monitoring. And we've concluded that there was an effective environment during the period under audit. And then furthermore, you'll see the key processes listed there. Those processes play a significant part in ultimately getting to accurate numbers within the general ledger and ultimately the financial statements. And we had no issues through testing any of these key processes, A, either from the design of the control, or B, through actual validating transactions that impacted the financial statements. So we've concluded that there's both the proper design and the control is operating functionally. Any questions so far? Okay. I just have a couple slides here, just high-level audit results, or at least the financial statement numbers over the past 3 years. And this will be in the management discussion and analysis section of your financial statements, which is the front part of the annual financial statements that have been issued. And you'll just see at a high level, so the first governmental activities, that this includes the general fund, it includes capital projects funds for the predominant part here. And you'll see over the last 3 years that the total assets of the governmental activities have increased. So total assets for governmental activities was just over $150 million for the year. Comparing that to liabilities have also increased, primarily with pension liabilities increasing this past year. Total liabilities were at $128 million. So net position for the governmental activities had increased to $39 million for the fiscal year. When you look at the business type activities, that's including the electric fund, water, wastewater, your proprietary type funds. Total assets had increased to $248 million for the year, compared to $58 million of liabilities, which leads to another increase in the net position for the business type activities to just over $190 million for the year. And then from a revenue and expense perspective, here on slide 10, you'll see the same 3-year information for both the governmental activities as well as the business type activities. You'll see that total revenue for the governmental activities was at $57.7 million, compared to total expenses of $55.8 million. And then on a business type activities basis, $64 million of revenue for fiscal year 2022 for your business type activities, compared to $55 million of expenses in your business type activities. And again, this is all explained, and variances are also described in the management and discussion and analysis section written by management.
Yes, and the majority Actually, Chris, can I have you go back one slide for
Yep.
me? Just a second. Because I do want to take a minute to stop here. So we did have a very good year. We still had strong revenue. General fund had a deficit. Again, the general fund had a deficit in fiscal year '22. However, the other funds within the governmental project, primarily the capital improvement project fund, had a surplus of $2 million. The reason for the surplus was the timing of funds versus the timing of when the expenditures of a project were finished. So oftentimes on the CIP side, it's kind of like, I don't want to call it a roller coaster, but it is that swing. You know, we fund things, then when the projects are finished, the next year there's no additional funding come in, you got all the spends, and then there's a deficit. But still, a very strong year, over $1 million in governmental side. The business type, $9 million. The majority of that was in water and wastewater fund. So overall, net position for the entire city was a little over $10 million to the good for last year, which is phenomenal. We are still doing financially what we need to do. However, I say that to say this, we are getting ready to do bond issues. I've already had several questions, and I've made sure that our bond counsel and also that our financial advisor is aware. But when you look at this first statement here, you look at the liability section and you see it going from 94 up to 128.5 million, and you think, oh, okay. We're still financially strong, our internal controls are where they need to be, our fund balance is good, our policies are on point. However, the reality of what happened in fiscal year '22 is that our police and fire fund and our unfunded liability and the unfunded percentage massively increased. And I mean massively, like more than doubled and tripled what they were before. So we are going to, Scott and I, we've been doing some strategic thoughts and planning. We've worked, we've had our actuarial group that was already in here and had explained that, our funding was where it needed to be. However, what happened was, we had a year where we had like $5 million just in the police and fire pension, $5 million market loss. So what we put in is funded, more than came out in payments, either in lump sum or otherwise. Then what we made, very little in like dividends and income. Again, what we funded, the dividends and income, were less than what we paid out to retirees. Then on top of it, we had this big market loss. The problem with the market loss is for the first time ever, it was a double hit for us. Not only did we have the $5 million market loss, and I will try to explain this, but again, it's actuarial valuations. So they look at an amortization schedule and they say how many years, right? At your interest rates and your discount rates, how many years? Because the market was such a massive swing and our fund was so low, it changed our discount rate. So it moved our discount rate. It was no longer, the discount rate is more on the expense side. The investment rate is what we think we're going to earn. So typically, they're the same. No problem. However, this year was not. So the actuarials changed our discount rate by almost 2%. And when I say that small change, it led to multi-millions of dollars on the liability side. Now, they said, not a problem. You can wait. The market will rebound, right? But the bonding and rating agencies are not going to go with that for a strategy. So we've done some other things. We're doing some studies. We're talking about other things we could potentially do. But I'm just making everybody aware that is a pretty big jump in our liabilities, considering that the rest of them all reduced for payments that we have done and payments that we have made and things that have happened. So again, strong position. However, as you see in the governmental activities under the unrestricted fund balance, a negative 41 million, and that's because really what's still, if we close today, what we would continue to owe in OPEB, so retiree health insurance, and pension costs would eat everything up, and then some. I'm sorry, Councilmember Alshire, you had a
You're saying above and beyond the 41.
No, the negative 41.
Right, when you're
is-
saying, yeah, it would eat
Yeah.
above and beyond what you have there.
That's what that,
Right. So the
Unless you were to
75 to
sell it if it's
99, you're saying is a reflection of those escalation long-term liabilities?
Yes.
It is not a reflection of the next page's increase from the 26 to the 31
Next
on the
page.
public safety side.
No.
Like, that has no role in it.
So on slide,
Yeah.
no.
And actually, if you go back to the balance sheet on page 9, most of the losses that Michelle's talking about, those actually get deferred and amortized over about 5 years. So you don't take all of the market loss in year one. You don't take all of this 2% discount change in year one. So if you notice, the line deferred outflows is $22 million. Whereas last year it was 3.8. The significant increase there is the offset for some of the increase you see in the liability. So that gets amortized. The idea, Gatsby's idea is that it's smoothing gains and losses because the liability can swing wildly, as you know, based on what happens with assumptions in the market. This is a way of smoothing it in through your expenses so that your expenses aren't swinging as wildly when your pensions swing.
And, I mean, we're very fortunate because the state of Maryland, so our state of Maryland retirement system, it is actually recorded a year behind. So the market as of June 30, 2022 is only reflected on our income statement in our balance sheet here for police and fire pension. Our state of Maryland pension did not see those large fluctuations because it was still based on what was valued June 30, 2021, because they're a year behind in the cycle. So for instance, police and fire pension went from liability, we started the year at 56.6. End of year, police and fire liability was 76.2 million. We started the year funded at 47.8. And we had worked hard to finally get up to that, over the 40%. As of June 30, 2022, 29.2%. So, again, our financial statements are very strong. I don't want anybody to think that they're not. We're doing everything right. We're doing everything we're supposed to. We've got our actuary. We're funding at the levels that we're supposed to. But the reality is, even though they say your funding is good, our funding is going to have to be better.
I feel like in my brain, what I'm trying to think about is this is like a big smoothing out to make happen, right?
It is.
Like we're at the beginning of the roller coaster and we're gonna try and like push that flat, right?
Hopefully.
I mean, that's a big, no?
It took us quite a while to get to over 45% funding.
Yeah.
And a police and fire pension.
And then the 59 in the current and other assets, that's not a material, right?
It's what?
No, it is.
Okay.
That's
So it's
mostly
like, it could be
cash.
like, yes,
Most of it's
Okay.
cash. Cash and
That's what I wanted to
receivables is
know. Most
probably
of it's cash.
95% of it.
Okay.
yes. And again, on the governmental activities, it's just reflecting general funds, CDBG, economic redevelopment, capital improvement projects. A few of the other smaller ones, like the grant fund and stuff. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, Chris, keep
No,
going,
it's fine.
because it is a good message. I don't want anybody to feel like it's not, When we say overall the city had a $10 million surplus, again, primarily all of that in the business type funds, over 9 million, and largely 6.8 of that was in water and wastewater, so within 2 of our funds. The general fund, even though we had a deficit, we still ended the year really strong. The only reason we had a deficit, our revenues were where they needed to be, so were our expenses. It's that we had made the commitment that we were going to utilize some of our fiscal year 21 surplus when we had so much. We were going to use it in 2022, and that's what we did, and that is the reason why we have a deficit in fiscal year 22. Not because our ongoing revenue streams didn't match our normal outgoing revenue streams, is because we did those large fund balance reserve utilizations for some projects that we said we were going to do. Okay.
Okay. For the last few slides, I won't walk through each one of these points, and I hit on several of these items on my first slide with the results. But if we had any difficulties getting through the audit If we had any disagreements with management, audit adjustments, or if we found any fraud, I'd be required to bring that to your attention as a result of our audit procedures. And I have nothing of a negative nature I need to bring to your attention through the completion of our audit. And with that, I'll open up for any questions or comments.
I think one comment I'll make on page 10 is the importance, I guess for me, it's always been a bellwether to look at our property tax number and our public safety number and ensure that our property tax number remains above that because, as I explain to citizens all the time, the bulk of our expense operationally is in public safety, contrary to the belief at times. And, you know what I mean? So it's very important that our tax base is growing faster than that number grows because that portion of our operations has traditionally largely dictated what we're able to afford to provide in services to the citizens at large. So we're healthier now than we were probably 3 years ago when those numbers were both like at 28.
Right.
You know what I mean? And neck and neck, and now I feel like we're kind of, you know,
Yes,
getting over that.
hopefully, and
Even in face of the fact that we've escalated it, you know, $5 million over a 3-year period, our tax base is growing strong enough now to dole out more on the economic development side and things like that.
yes, and we're very hopeful. I'm kind of waiting to get with our local representatives of State Department of Assessment and Taxations because we're headed in, they should be finished with our new triennial assessment period, and I'm very hopeful
Yeah.
that we're going to see increases, right? We've had annexations, we've had growth, we've had good housing market is still
That's right.
moving in a
And
positive direction, even with inflation and interest rates both.
honestly, after hearing you say that for the past 15, 20 years, we keep that kind of at the forefront to make sure that we are making that gap wider. Because it is, it's makes absolute sense, always has. Do you want to, just very briefly, we just had our quarterly meetings on current year expenditures, just basically a real brief where we're at least so far this fiscal year?
So.
Because we have inflationary,
Yes, so for fiscal year '23, overall through September, all the departments are where they need to be. Our revenue, again, is strong, it's where it needs to be. I will say, there are certain things like our state income tax revenue, it is less than it was in the prior year, but still on level and on par with our overall budget. There's a couple other things. Our property tax is doing really well. We are starting to see more appeals and abatements come in, which was expected because they were backlogged for so long. On the expense side, there are several areas across the city, like, so if you look in specific departments and you look at certain line items, expenses are taking a hit because of inflation, because gas prices, for a multitude of other things, but everybody's keeping it in mind, and we've talked with all the departments, and they're doing their best to make sure, even with that overall, they will still be within budget. And as I said, first quarter, we didn't see any tremendous red flags. I will say, project-wise, you know, it happens daily. It seems like every time we get bids for a project, and they come in, they're
crazy.
way more than we thought. Like 32 North Potomac came in today,
Yeah.
and it's significantly higher than we thought, but we'll find a way. And I do want to thank, in all seriousness, Brooke Garver and Jeff, our senior financial accountant. They really do a heavy lift with all this. They also prepare the uniform report. It seems like it should be really easy, and they just take the financial statements, but it is not. It is data entry. You have to individually key all
but
these
she
numbers.
makes it look easy.
There's like 40, yes, yes. And then also acknowledge that Chris also, our auditors, also have to speak with both the city administrator and the mayor, so thank you both very much for taking the time there. So when he says that there is nothing to report, it isn't just talking with me and my staff, it's talking with other departments, it's working downstairs at the lobby to watch transactions and asking them how this stuff flows and getting it back up, working with human resources, working with payroll. So it's a tremendous effort, and I'm very proud and happy to say that we had such another good audit. And again, financially, we ended the year really strong, even though the general fund had a deficit. So we're still at 34% in our general fund. And I know that that's a big number for you. We're significantly over our policy. It was at 38.4% the year before, so it decreased because we're utilizing it. But we're over the 17% where we have the policy.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
your
Thank
hard
you.
work. Yes, thank you.
It's called the Brucci Fund Balance, by the way.
That's why I look at him when I say that.
All right. You have 2 grant applications for Maryland Energy Administration, FEMA.
So good afternoon. I think this is going to be pretty quick, hopefully. We have 2 grants that staff would like to apply for. And by the city's grant policy, we were supposed to notify the city council and get a nod of the head before we do this. The first grant is from the Maryland Energy Administration. It's a grant, the same grant that we've gotten, I think Rodney said 5 or 6 times in the past. We use it to replace old sodium lights, parking lights with LED lights, which are much more energy efficient. So it's a good program. They reimburse us very quickly. They're good people to work with. So we are requesting about $40,000 total. Out of that, we'd have about a $5,000 match that either is coming from the parking fund or the light department fund. Since we're lighting a parking lot, that makes sense with that. The other grant is a new program through FEMA. It's part of the overall bipartisan infrastructure act that was approved. They've made a lot of money available just for infrastructure projects. This particular one is what they call a BRIC grant. It's Building Resilience, Infrastructure and Communities. And you can use it for a number of different things to try to strengthen a community to deal with climate change or the more severe storms that we've been getting, that sort of thing, disaster relief. And so in our case, we don't have a big project that's ready to go that we would apply for funding for. But one thing that we did want to apply for funding on is a study of our storm drainage system. I think if you remember back right after Labor Day, we had some severe storms and had some localized flooding. And what we realized is we have a good map of where all of our pipes and things are, but we've never really studied that to see, are they big enough? Do they have enough capacity to carry the storm flow that's coming in? So what we'd like to do is apply for a grant through this program to hire a consultant to develop a computer model that would actually look at our whole system and try to figure out, okay, here's a bottleneck, here are places that you need to work on. And that will help us, it'll help to inform what our capital improvement project list is, because right now, we sort of react to things after the flooding happens. We'd like to be more proactive, find problems and take care of them before they actually do become a problem. So for that grant, we're proposing to request $75,000 in grant funding from FEMA, and we would match it with $25,000 from the Stormwater Protection Fund budget.
Sounds good to me. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, request to purchase CNS property 216 South Prospect.
Yes. Yep.
Well, just go ahead and put everything out there. We did receive a request to purchase 216 South Prospect Street, which is a vacant lot from Elise and Paul Durnick, which are neighboring property owners, for a proposed purchase price of $15,000. For some background on the property itself, it had a significant fire causing damage to the structure on May 10th, 2020. On July 21st, 2020, the city accepted a donation of the property from the owner at that time, and then we later proceeded with demolition for that as well. When we did accept the property, we did also pass an ordinance as well, which basically stated for us to tear down the property, and then once we were done with the public use of it, we would put it back on the CNS process to put it back in private ownership. Hence why we're here as well. So I guess we're already a yes on this one?
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, we'll be bringing that back for the regular session then. Or sorry, for, and then,
Looks good to me. 45.
to also move forward with this for another CNS property, 239 North Locust Street. We received an offer to purchase the property from Augustine Boyce, who is the majority owner of Allshire Property LLC. He's looking to purchase the property for $45,000, do a mixed-use redevelopment of the property itself, with four two-bedroom apartments above and commercial on the first floor. Once again, I guess we are already a yes as well. So we'll be bringing that back for the introduction of the ordinance on this one.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What, you don't think?
City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple of things here. Another busy weekend this Saturday. Chris Kindle Christmas Market. Actually, it's Friday and Saturday night in University Plaza. Friday 3 to 8, Saturday 10 to 4. Again, that's in University Plaza. Blooms Alley Monthly Market at 101 East Baltimore Street is on Saturday from 1 to 7. Also, we're having a new event. Brittany Arizmendi has put together having LL Beam come to town and set up a pop-up shop on the central lot right by the Elizabeth Hager Center. That's Saturday, 10 to 5. They'll have their product there, as well as opportunities to order online if you're so inclined, and I think they have a couple other events going on. So it's a pretty big day. Friday night, of course, with the Christmas market, and then Saturday is going to be a big day within about 2 blocks of the public square. So we'll try to get down there and do that. The LL Bean is going to be a really cool pop-up shop.
That's Saturday and Sunday.
That's Saturday and Sunday, 10 to 5, sorry. Also, just, there was a press release went out this afternoon, but I just wanted to reiterate about yard waste. Waste management is suffering some staff shortages through illness, and they understand that they are getting delayed in collecting yard waste. The last yard waste collection for the calendar year will be the 18th of this month. For the next 3 weeks, expect delays with yard waste collection. This means your collection may be delayed 1 or 2 days past the normal collection day, but please leave your yard waste out for collection. Nobody will, well, your neighbors may complain, but nobody from the city will take any action on you. And just appreciate your patience on that, but I think they were only down to 2 or 3 drivers in the area due to illness, so it's wreaking havoc to all of us. And then just a couple notes to finish on. On behalf of city staff, send our condolences to the family of FAO Zach Reed, who passed away tragically yesterday morning. I know HFD is hurting. All of us are hurting over this one. And I know HFD has reached out and are going to be helping the family out in moving forward here with services. Also, we heard today also that John Erner passed away, our former city attorney. So condolences out to his family. And that's it for me.
Councilmember Martinez.
So, Councilwoman Burnett and myself on, was that Wednesday? Wednesday, we had a group that was from the Chamber of Commerce, HCC, and Washington County Schools, Investor Community of Hope, organized a group called a Diversity and Inclusion Committee to kind of go to the school system and offer like financial literacy to kids of color. And so their first program started called Cash and Dreams, which would be 6 months, where they will come in and get different speakers. And they came up to City Hall, it was 12 of them, and they asked good questions, and they banged your gavel really, really hard. Like, that was like probably the most requested thing to do. And also got to go up on Clock Tower, that was really cool. That was really cool. And then the Christmas tree lighting at City Park was amazing. My grandkids loved it so much, from the hayride to the the museum, all the different people that was out there. It was really, really, really cool. And then I want to congratulate the participants that's graduating from drug court on Friday, and also day reporting center. I'll be out of town and miss that graduation. And then Detective Weaver was at the Boys and Girls Club at Elgin Station today. And while we were sitting here, my grandkids sent me pictures in his bullet
Card from Governor Hogan, so it's odd, the things you remember sort of each year that you get in your mail, but that's one of the things that I can recall receiving each year, and just wanted to say, as he is outgoing, to thank him for his service to the state.
I was approached by April Crohair, which I think that many of us are familiar with, in a request to form a Disabilities Advisory Committee for the city of Hagerstown. And I think that it is a very good idea. One of the things that at the Christmas tree lighting, she was concerned because a lot of her, her children that she serves and her own son was going to have a tough time at the Christmas tree lighting because there wasn't a designated area. Now, Brittany Arizmendi and Eric and everyone worked hard, and there was going to be one. We made the arrangements to do it, and it was too cold for them to come. But it's just one of those things, we talk about, and we want an inclusive community, and we have to like consistently think outside of, our table and who sits at our table. So I think that it is something that we should explore, and, hopefully with, your support, we can look into how we can make that happen. Because I know the county has
County
one.
does have one, yeah. We have one seat on it.
Yeah, and I think it would be good for us to also probably have one as well. So I promised her that I would mention it, and so there you go. Otherwise, and condolences to Zach's family, to Taylor, and to HFD. It's very tragic, so not a good time of year.
I just want to thank city staff and everyone who worked hard on the city park tree lighting. It was awesome. I liked how everything was spread out this year, and at about 8 o'clock at night, I was waiting on food from Bella's Bites, and there was still about 100 people in line for the hayride at 8 o'clock at night. It was packed. And all the kids were having a good time. And shout out to my daughter Layla, who was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. She was a good sport and took lots of pictures with lots of kids. So thank you to her. And thanks to Girls on the Run, who put together the gingerbread dash on Sunday. It was a 5K. There was about 200 people in our downtown area running in front of the mural, and Girls on the Run is an awesome cause. And thanks, Shelley, for running it with me.
Yeah.
Because we did a lot of running, by
Yeah.
the way.
Really?
We made a
Yes,
lot of plans.
A lot of running, yeah.
We made a lot of plans. We were able to talk.
Hardly any.
We were, breathe and talk about a lot of things.
And, my condolences to Zach Reed's family, to Taylor, to those 3 little girls. My heart's just broken for them, and for HFD. It's been a tough year, so I think we're all here if anyone needs anything, and we're sending lots of prayers. So with that, we are adjourned. See you tomorrow at 3 o'clock for the delegation meeting at HCC.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, and I'm joined by Chief Financial Officer Michelle Hepburn. And this is the time of year where you sort of start surfacing a little bit more at these meetings. And I know you really start ramping up, but what we were looking at today was kind of looking back at fiscal year 22. It's the annual audit. So sort of describe what this is, explain what this is that was being presented to Mayor and Council today.
Certainly. So first and foremost, I guess I will take a minute to say, it's fiscal year 22 audit. So that actually is the time period of July 2021 through June 30 of 2022. Because we're a governmental agency, we are required to have an annual independent auditor. Just means we have to employ an external group to come in and take a look at our records, our policies. I think, one of the things we heard our auditors say was that, they looked at internal controls. So they make sure that we have good policies in place, that we're being financially responsible, that we're being good stewards of our community and our taxpayer dollars. But what they do is they take a look at those policies to see what we say we're going to do, and then they take it a step further and they say, okay, so let's see the actual process and your procedures. And then they just walk through different things like that. So one of the things they may do is they go downstairs to the lobby and they say, okay, here on the bank statement, we can see a big, large deposit. Break it down for us and show us what you have, how you posted it in your system, the whole way through. And it takes a little bit of time to do that. Yeah. They do the same thing on the payroll side. They say, okay, they look at, they'll start and say, here's the time period, here's how many pay weeks we actually pay every single week. So they will do several weeks within a quarter, and then you give them a report. They drill down to individual employees, and then what you do from there is they look at the records, they look at our backup, they look at our timekeeping system, they go to human resources and look at the employee file to make sure what we're actually paying somebody per hour is what is on their file, what we're supposed to do. Again, it's just a way for an independent company to come in and validate that we are doing everything that we are supposed to do. We are required to follow GASB, and it's just a set of accounting standards that is meant for governmental agencies. And so what they're trying to make sure is that you are following appropriate accounting protocol. And so you hear that repeated time and time again. Again, just looking at the financial statements, making sure we're doing everything we need to. It's an extra layer, some extra security and peace of mind, if you will, for not only our mayor and council, because they're not here actually processing payroll every single week. That's not their job.
Which would be interesting.
Wow, They have to entrust in their employees and their staff that they're going to do that with the foundations that we have in place. And so this is just that extra layer of security, and it's very important that it's external. You do not necessarily want me, who is the keeper of all this, to also be doing your audit. Not that I wouldn't do it, and not that I wouldn't do a good job. However, you need that extra validation, and it's very important. So it's sometimes very dry information, and sometimes accounting is its own language, and I recognize that. It's not easy for everybody. So we go through this audit, but at the same time, this October 31 deadline isn't just for our audit, but it is also for the completion of our ACFR, and it's just an acronym, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And what that amounts to is a little bit over 100+ page document that has financial statements. It has a lot of details. It has, a lot of footnote disclosures. And we make it available, and it's out on our website so that it's available for the public. We have bound copies and books. But I'm going to look for it just a moment if I could. So as soon as we do this, by the end of December, so December 31st, we will actually prepare what's called a popular annual financial report. Currently, we don't print like thousands, 15,000, and disseminate it to all the residents. But what we do, it's like a 13-page snapshot of everything that's in this document.
The Cliff's Notes of that document.
It is. Yeah. And it also contains things that, from an auditing standpoint might not be essential, but it contains things basically like, here is a copy of a sample of a utility bill, and let's break it down so that it explains the utility bill and it explains the tax bill. But it also includes this high-level dollars of, what we've received and how we're spending or where we're spending. So it's a little bit more user-friendly. It's definitely not quite as thick and as cumbersome.
Yeah, and the audit itself, I mean, is a tremendous form of transparency, because one of the things that I think anyone who is a taxpayer wants to know is, how are my tax dollars being used, number one, but then are they being used efficiently and effectively? And this really validates that, as you said.
Yes, and actually make sure that we're not using them in a manner in which we're not supposed to.
Right.
It also ensures that staff is not just, again, spending them in such a way that is outside the framework and the policies.
Yep.
You know, he mentioned at high level, but they literally go through details. They will pick, you know, a significant amount of transactions because we have so many, and they will go to the detail of, they will look at the consent agenda forms that our council has approved. They will look at the purchase order that was created in all the documents. Do we have quotes? Was the dollar amount high enough to do a bid? So they look at all of that, but even more than that, we have to do print screens and show every single person and every single level of staff approval who's approved it.
Wow.
So if there's something that's over the dollar threshold and had to go to council, that council form and that council approval has to be there. So again, it's just a way to ensure, like I said, that we are being fiscally prudent and we're actually following the policies in which we should.
And so when this audit is complete each year, is that a time for you to sort of exhale at that point, that, hey, we did it again?
I would like to say that we do. I mean, it sounds like from like, you know, we end June 30th and we have until October 31st, but there's a lot that goes into it. But as soon as this portion is done and October 31st happens, it is this massive ramp up, as you would say, because we just seem to have so many other things going on. As soon as this is completed, then we prepare this to the GFOA for the award. We also work on the popular annual financial report. We are also in the midst of, and believe it or not, we've already rolled out all the budget instructions in all of our departments. We're working with those throughout the month of December for our fiscal year 24 budget. So it is, and we're always happy when we hand this off. But then it's like deep breath in and off to the races.
How should a taxpayer kind of, you know, feel about the numbers that are reflected in the report that you presented? I mean, what should be the takeaway? And I know there are a lot of things included in there, but can you kind of break that down a little bit to what it is that, you know, they should be maybe most focused on, or what would make more sense to a layperson, even such as myself?
Certainly. So I think one of the things that, you know, from an audit perspective that we focused on was we split everything into governmental funds and governmental activities versus business type and business type funds and enterprise funds. Our business and enterprise funds is just one big, huge summary of all of those funds that have to be self-sufficient, and they are supposed to cover all their costs with charges for services. So that would be our electric fund, water, wastewater, stormwater, golf, property management, parking. And aside from those, I think really where everybody focuses the most attention is on the governmental side, our governmental funds. By far and large, the largest fund is the general fund, and 68% of all the dollars that come into the general fund is funded from taxpayer dollars, whether that's, you know, commercial, residential, real estate, or personal property. But that is by far our largest single source. So I think everybody focuses the most on the general fund, and it's definitely where you want to see, you know, again, where you get your dollars from and how you spending your dollars. So I think for the most part, everybody focuses on the general fund section. So it's laid out. It's not quite as detailed as what you would find in our budget book, but there is still sufficient details within there that you can easily see, like on the expenses, how we're spending it by category. So police, fire, I mean, and that is a requirement. We are breaking it out the way we have to.
Right. You mentioned during your presentation, so I would like you to sort of explain this a little bit so that I have a greater understanding of this, and hopefully our audience does too. You know, what impact that utilizing the 2021 surplus had
Sure.
fiscal year '22? Because you talked about that a little bit, but what does that mean exactly?
Sure. So basically, fiscal year '21 is over, and whatever we accumulated and whatever we had as a surplus kind of went into, let's say, I don't want to call it a savings account, but let's oversimplify it. So it's in your savings account, right? So you saved all that money back in '21.
Okay.
Now in '22, we're looking at everything that we wrote, all the expenses, all the checks that we paid out, and all the money that has come in. Well, some of the checks that we wrote out was for bigger projects that we were going to use our fiscal year '21 surplus for.
Okay.
So we didn't have that revenue. We didn't have money coming in again in fiscal year '22.
Okay.
So it's a timing issue. So fiscal year '22 looks like we had a deficit in the general fund. But the main focus is, as you can see, the amount of our deficit, and I'll just take a minute because it was $585,000. But when you look at the details within the general fund, you will actually see in the expenditure section at the very bottom, transfers from fund balance reserves.
Okay.
So everything that we've used prior fund balance, prior surpluses, technically should be what our new deficit is. And that's at just shy of 4.5 million.
All right.
So we were able to, with new ongoing routine revenue in our fiscal year '22, as well as our routine, recurring, normal expenditures, plus spending another 4.5 million of monies that we had accumulated, and still
Okay.
we ended at 585. So again, the story there is, aside from fund balance reserve utilization, if we hadn't had that surplus and we hadn't utilized any of that, you really want to see that your ongoing revenues are covering your ongoing expenditures.
Right.
It's one of the things we say, we do not use fund balance or prior surpluses to fund ongoing things like payroll, because how do you ever catch up if you do not have offsetting revenue coming in?
Would not
Right?
happen. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty elementary when you
And
get down to it.
Correct.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
eventually you overdraw everything, right?
Right,
So that's where that's the point you do not want to be at.
Yeah, and you also said during the meeting, you mentioned ended the year strong. So what specifically do you mean by that?
So I think, quite honestly, it's the fact that we stayed within our overall budget, not just the general fund and not just one department, but collectively across the city of Hagerstown, all of our departments, all of our areas. I do, again, when I say, the majority of the focus is spent a lot on the general fund, but in my position, I look at the city as a whole. Right? We are one organization. So for me, I want to see that the electric and water and wastewater and parking funds are charging, that what they are bringing in from their customer base, the people who are using those services, are covering the cost. Because the last thing we want is for those funds to start having such deficits and getting to the point where they're so negative or have no cash flow, because then the only thing that you can do is move over taxpayer dollars to help subsidize that.
Right.
Who might not necessarily be the users of that parking spot or
Yeah.
parking position,
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Did any ARPA funding factor into this at all?
Yes, so we did have some ARPA dollars and some ARPA revenue, so that would flow through and it would have been included as grant revenue
Okay.
at the point that we spent it. So you will see some in the expenses and you will see some in the grant. However, our grant revenue, when you look from fiscal year '22 to fiscal year '21, was a decrease, because in fiscal year '21 is when we were able to utilize and
Yeah.
do premium pay. But we also had CARES dollars that we had received from the county, and it was much larger than the amount that we had spent out in our ARPA dollars.
Based on the audit and the numbers that you're looking at here, what are your concerns, if any? I know it seems to be a pretty positive message, but is there anything that sort of catches your attention on the other side of that you feel will need to be addressed?
Yes. So one of the biggest things is, 68% of our base is, in the general fund, is taxpayer and real estate tax dollars. So we are in the midst, and actually the State Department of Assessment and Taxations, we get a triennial assessment. It just means that Once every 3 years, they reassess the value of all the property across the city of Hagerstown.
Yeah.
And so for us, really and truly, you know, what I am hoping to avoid is a repeat of what we've had several years ago, like in 2008, and then we got in a cycle that every single third year it just repeated, but we had an 11% decrease, market reduction. So I'm really hoping that the market has stayed strong. I'm hoping that all the growth that we're seeing, the annexation, the rehab, the renovation, the strong standing still in the housing market. It's a positive thing this time than unlike in prior years where we saw the housing market substantially change with fluctuations
Oh, yeah.
in interest rates and inflation. That hasn't necessarily happened now. So I'm really hoping that that remains good. Because if you deplete 68% of your overall tax base and your overall revenue, you're hard pressed to find enough revenue in other areas to make up and cover the costs that you need to.
If anyone has any questions on this, where would you direct them to get those answers?
Certainly. So first and foremost, I encourage anybody who has not been out on the City of Hagerstown website and under the Finance Department page to please do so. We include not just this, but also our budget documentation as well as our popular annual financial report. We don't just have it out there for a single year. So go out to that page, take a look, and then reach out. All of our information and email addresses are out there.
Okay. Well,
Always happy to help.
certainly appreciate all of the work that you and your department does. I know you say this is a team effort, and that is certainly no lie. This is a very collective effort to make all of this happen year in and year out. And congratulations on the clean audit, and look forward to talking to you in the future about more positive things related to the city of Hagerstown. Michelle, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching. That's a wrap for Council Wrap this time. We'll see you next time.